News Now is brought to you by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank, Docomo Pacific, island-wide, worldwide, the choice is clear. From the Pacific News Center in Hagåtña, Guam, here's Clint Ridgell and Janella Carrera with Betsy Brown and Roselle Romanes. PNC Sports with Blake Watson. And weather with Joanna O. With your news now.
Good evening and thanks for tuning in to the Pacific News Center. I'm Clint Ridgell.
And I'm Janella Carrera. At the top of your news tonight, the victims of the alleged baby puncher Yu Hua Han expressing dismay that Han was only charged with misdemeanors, therefore allowing for a lower bail amount of $5,000 instead of the $20,000 the Attorney General's office had recommended. 44-year-old Yu Hua Han appeared in court Saturday to face charges related to a video that went viral on social media last week. She's accused of punching a 10-month-old baby girl in the face at the Micronesia Mall. But instead of felony charges, Han was only charged with misdemeanors. Thus, her bail was only set at $5,000. Chief Prosecutor Phil Tydinko explains.
If we receive any further police reports or evidence that suggests that we should charge a higher crime, like an aggravated assault or something differently, then we'll do that. But based on the evidence in the police reports at this time, these are the charges that we're charging at this time.
When you go to Island, you can go out anywhere, and if there's a barbecue, they're like, come get something for the kids, you know, and to know that the justice system isn't following through with your guys' culture and tradition, it's hard to think about that.
That was Crystal Townsend. She tells us that she had a similar experience with Han. Townsend's daughter and husband, she says, were stabbed by Han back in February 2009 at the Lone Star restaurant. Townsend says Han was found not guilty by reason of insanity, but she was not aware that her case had been expunged.
We're not aware she was released. We were not aware that the case was expunged until this attack just happened, and I reached out to that family.
Townsend says her daughter was stabbed in the leg and her husband on the chest. She notes that their injuries could have been fatal, as Han had missed her husband's heart by just a few inches. And when Townsend found out that Han may have struck again,
it makes me sick. It makes us sick to the core. As soon as I opened up that picture, my heart stopped. And yes, that's her. That's an image you'll never forget.
No one has been able to confirm that Han's previous assault case ever existed, and even if it did, an expungement would mean that technically the case doesn't exist and thus cannot be used as evidence against the defendant in future cases.
To do so, I would be charged with there's actually a crime, disclosing expunged records.
In the most recent incident, the girl's mother, Alyssa Esser, says her baby suffered bruising around her eye, but it's not an injury serious enough, as defined by Guam law, to justify felony charges.
It's like the serious bodily injuries defined as any protracted loss of limb or loss of consciousness or major laceration requiring sutures or broken bone or fracture or loss of a bodily function.
It's sickening. She should be deported.
And Han's next court appearance is scheduled for January 14th.
The former Chief of Staff for Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio, Dong Cho, was arrested on charges of family violence. Cho appeared in court today and was charged with family violence and assault as a misdemeanor. According to the complaint, Cho physically assaulted his wife, Maribel Cho, by holding her around the neck and putting her in a headlock. Maribel showed up in court to express her desire for her husband's release, saying she wanted to drop the charges. Cho's attorney, Tom Fisher, argued to have his client released on a performance bond instead of cash bail.
As things go, the allegations are not quite that serious. The alleged victim in the case has actually visited the Attorney General's office and spoke to, I believe the lady's name is Connie. She wants to drop the charges. And
Cho served as Lieutenant Governor's Chief of Staff since he took office in 2011. However, Cho was recently moved to the Guam Economic Development Authority. He was released today on a $2,000 performance bond.
Governor Eddie Calvo and Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio made their oaths of office for their second term in an inauguration ceremony at the governor's complex this morning. PNC's Rizal Romanes attended the event and has more in this report.
This legacy is about you, the people of Guam.
It's 4 more years for the Calvo Tenorio team. On the Adalup lawn this morning, the pair delivered their respective inaugural addresses before island dignitaries, families, friends, and supporters. First up, Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio reflected on the accomplishments of the last 4 years.
Since 2010, we have seen the employment increase, established new schools, and renovated others, encouraged healthcare expansion, developed affordable housing, recruited safety professionals, started a new museum, and invested millions in infrastructure.
In his address, Tenorio says the formula for success to many of the island's problems is for residents to have self-empowerment through education. Next up is Governor Eddie Calvo's speech, which also focused on the goal of preparing residents for what they say were opportunities that lie ahead. With education, Calvo says they can reduce poverty, homelessness, and crime on our island, among other things.
And I believe, with all of us doing our part, that Guam will be a place where the choice is made for the unborn to be born. And poverty will be a shadow of what once was. And marriages will last longer, and they will be happier. And husbands will not beat their wives, and mothers will not abandon their children, and families will be healthier and stronger. Now let's take off these suits, get back to work, and enjoy building the Guamanian dream together. Thank you. God bless you and Happy New Year.
Rizal Romanes, PNC News.
The 33rd Guam legislature was sworn in this morning. Judy Wonpat will remain Speaker, and during her inaugural address, she focused on Guam's political status and Guam's reliance on importing food. She pointed out that the ancestors to Guam's native people were self-sufficient and independent for thousands of years.
Judy Wonpat retained her title as Speaker of the Guam Legislature during today's inauguration, and in her inaugural address, she focused on Guam's relationship with the U.S. and its reliance on imported goods.
Some believe that we are powerless and dependent on the United States for federal aid and imported goods. I believe that we have always had the ability to sustain our people and our way of life, just as our ancestors did for thousands of years before European colonization.
She spoke about the military buildup.
Congress recently approved funding to begin construction for the military buildup. And while this brings money to the island, it doesn't come with a guarantee that the money will be used to improve our way of life. What is guaranteed is that our population is going to grow at an unnatural rate and that our government services will need to keep up. This legislature will have to figure out how to fund upgrades to our utilities, our schools, and our public services, and ensure that the impact from the incoming population doesn't affect the already strained services we provide to our own people.
Speaker Wonpat said Guam's political status renders the island powerless, excludes the island from the table where decisions are made, and allows the U.S. to treat residents of Guam as second-class citizens. She vowed to push for a vote on self-determination called a plebiscite.
We have to put our internal bickering aside and creatively explore a greater destiny for our people. In the past 60 years alone, we have become almost solely dependent on ships to bring in our food. As shipping costs continue to rise, this is becoming more and more impractical. I am committed to identifying resources that will support the growth of permaculture on our island. Expanding local farms and growing our own food not only enhances our economy, but also promotes a healthier community.
The speaker talked about strengthening regional ties with other islands in Micronesia, just as the ancient Chamorros had when they had an extensive trade network with other Micronesian islands.
B.J. Cruz also retained his position as Vice Speaker of the legislature as well.
Republican senators are asking for more money for their office budgets. At the inauguration ceremony today, Senator Jim Espaldon brought up the matter through a point of inquiry during the adoption of the standing rules. The adoption of the standing rules is typically a procedure that takes place without much fanfare. However, this time around, it was objected to by Senator Frank Blas Jr. Blas and Espaldon explained to PNC that the Republicans feel they should be given some committees to preside over in order to be given more responsibility and more funding to allow them to serve the people of Guam as the Democrats do.
Our perspective is, my perspective is, well then if it's all based on committees, since there's only 15 of us, we should all have a committee. That way we all have the same budgets and we all can do something. But the way it is now, since we have no chairmanship of any committee, we have a reduced budget.
What we're looking for is for parity. We're asking for parity. We're asking for continued discussion on this thing.
Typically, the party with the majority presides over all committees and therefore gets the bulk of legislative funding for their offices.
And Guam officially has a new Attorney General.
Discharge my duties as the Attorney General of Guam. So help me God.
Retired judge and former Guam Attorney General Elizabeth Barrett Anderson was sworn in this afternoon over at the Supreme Court of Guam. Barrett Anderson had been appointed in the past as an Attorney General, serving from 1987 to 1994. She then became a senator until she was appointed to the bench in 1997, remaining there until she retired in 2012.
I am committed to refocusing our work for crime victims and bringing much-needed training to our island notaries. I am committed to an Attorney General's office that is open, transparent, accessible, and an AG office that is accountable.
There have been 7 Attorney Generals that have preceded her and succeeded Barrett Anderson since she served.
Well, Blake Watson is back and he has a sneak peek of what's next in sports.
Hey, Blake here from sports, and I'm back. Just came in from the States. It was so cold, I'm just now thawing out. Yeah, so we'll get back to warm weather and sports coming up. Sports, not too far away, promise.